Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Grants and Government Contracting Podcast. With me here live in the studio is Lainey. Lainey, you want to say welcome to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're joining in. I'm joining in from North Georgia. It is very warm out. Almost feels like summer. I don't know. You'll have to drop in the comments where you're coming from and where you're joining from. Um, and we're so excited to have you here today. I know we're talking about some really interesting things that everybody's been worried about. So we're hoping we can give you a little bit of peace about that and a strategy moving forward for what 2025 holds.
Yeah, we are. Some of you guys are super concerned about what's going on, and some of you guys are, the least concerned. But today's episode, we're going to be talking about the some of the things that's happening from a government grant funding and contracting funding with different agencies, from nonprofits to for-profit organizations under the new administration. There's some executive orders. Some of it have been rescinded. We are in a climate of some uncertainty, confusion at best in some situations. So today's episode, well, that's what we're really going to be talking about. And more than anything, maybe what you can do and be more resilient during this time here. And so, and many of you guys are, working with different organizations, and some agencies have seen some tremendous shakeup. So that's what we're going to be talking about, all these changes and good, bad, and ugly. And so, yeah, exciting times, but also really challenging times too.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive in. I know we have some people joining in. We have some other people from North Georgia. We have some people from Louisiana, and we have someone from Austin, Texas today. So we're having a little bit of everybody. And I know more people will be coming in as we get it going. So, yeah, Abe, what are you, thinking? I know we've talked about that the news is a little crazy. And we've seen tariffs, we've seen a funding freeze. And I feel like we talked about this morning, but it's every single day is something different. So it's like we try to like keep up with what's going on. Even as we were preparing for this podcast, we're making our notes, we're, reading, researching. And even this morning, there was more stuff that was happened at midnight last night that we had to catch up on. So what are kind of your thoughts on everything?
Well, yeah, lots of thoughts, and a lot of it is, our opinions and our thoughts in terms of how to navigate during this time here. So, if you're just joining us, please put in your name and where you are joining us from. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the new administration changes that's going to be impacting nonprofits and for-profit organizations. But my thought on all these different executive orders and some of the policy changes here, there's going to be some good things that's going to happen from it, but a lot of it right now is there's a lot of confusion more than anything. So my first thought is this here: in the middle of all these different chaos or challenges or confusion, don't let fear consume you. Don't let uncertainty consume you. Don't let the unknown consume you. Because in anything, you as a leader in your organization, some of you are in charge of funding, some of you are in charge of programs, some of you are in charge of personnel. Uh, you have to be in a place where you have to have peace of mind. You have to say, okay, you know what? Someone else's crazy cannot be my crazy. Someone else's confusion cannot. I cannot let that be my confusion. Somebody else's challenges, I cannot let that be my challenges. So the first starting point is get yourself in a good place so that you can lead your organization, you can lead your team to overcome whatever obstacle, whatever challenges that may be facing your organization, specifically during these challenging times and confusing times here. So that's my first thought.
Yeah, and Abe, I want to ask this. Have you seen another time that's like this in your career? I know we've talked before. You've been through multiple changes in administrations and stuff like that. So you have seen the landscape of what it looks like another administration coming in, the changing of the contracting, the grants. Have you seen one like this kind of just to help set people up that this is not the first time it's ever happened.
Absolutely. So I've been in the government space since first heard about in 2006. Got into it in 2007, and really started the Government Contractors Association in 2010 to really equip organizations and businesses and nonprofits to thrive in as it relates to the government market itself. So I've seen different administration come and go. The back in 2008, we were in the middle of the Great Recession, right? It was a time of fear, right? A time of unknown, a time where lots of people lost their livelihood through income, through loss of jobs, through company downsizing, through the economy changing. So that was a even more of a challenging time than and more confusion than what we're going through right now. So yes, so I've seen this cycle. Uh, During that time, we a new president came into office 2000. We elected in 2008, came to office 2009, which was President Obama. And with that came a lot of changes, lots of new policies, lots of changes. We had more funding opportunities, but also some changes that impacted different organizations. From that, we went into after that, Donald Trump's first presidency came about. That came with a lot of different challenges. The Biden administration came about. That came with different challenges and confusion and different opportunities as well. And now we're Trump 2.0. And with this, there comes, I think at this point here, the current president says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I don't have to worry about reelection." So with all these changes, it's creating a lot of confusion to the industry. But through all of this here, my philosophy is this here: don't think blue or don't think red, don't think even purple, right? You always want to think green. How do you navigate your organization during these times here? And so green has to do with how do you access the opportunities so you can continue to thrive as an organization. And later on, part of this podcast here is all about that in terms of what can you do practically to thrive even in the middle of all this chaos.
Yeah. And I love that. And the whole thing of we can't live in fear and you can't operate a business in fear. If you're making decisions based on fear, I don't think you're going to get far. You've got to be ahead of the game. You've got to have a plan and you've got to move forward no matter what's happening, and kind of almost cut that off in the background of it doesn't matter what's happening. I still have my goals. I still have my mission that I have to move forward with. Whether if you're a nonprofit or you're a for-profit organization, I think that goes for both ways. If you're a nonprofit, you still have to, like you're saying, you have people that you have to serve. You have a mission that you have to go to, and you still have to push forward and have a game plan for what it is. If you're for-profit, it's the same thing. We want to excel our business. So I think some of the best ways to do that is, and that's what we're going to dive in today, is thinking out of the box. How do you get creative? How do you think out of the box and do different things than what you've done every single year now that we're moving into a different landscape? And how can you kind of make your funding more well-rounded and your business more well-rounded? That's a tongue tie. Try saying that 10 times fast.
Yeah, the first thought is this here. Yeah, first I'm going to address the landscape under a different administration. So traditionally, under a Democrat administration, they're going to focus more of their policies towards civilian agencies, whether it is HHS, CDC, NIH, or they're going to spend more focus on the EPA, Department of Forestry, USDA, some civilian agencies such as the Department of Education. So historically, right, because I'm speaking historically, a Democrat administration is going to focus on more of those agencies. Under a Republican administration, a more focused policy is going to shift towards DOD, is going to shift towards Homeland Security. So if you're looking at how do you adjust, where do you take your organization? You have to ebb and flow and adjust based upon that there. Now, USAID have recently seen some major changes GSA, which is a civil agency, have seen some major changes, and along with lots of other different EPA and so lots of different changes related to the environment. Any agency tied to environment itself are seeing a lot of it. Energy, the energy sector is going to see some changes. So you ebb and flow as different agencies have their budget increase and have their budget decrease. So that's the first thing, is understanding the general landscape from different administrations.
Yeah, and I think that it's ever changing, but like you're saying, history repeats itself. So as we're going through we've seen this before. If anybody's worked through, I'd be really interested to see. And if somebody, I know we have some people that are in, especially nonprofits, and they've been in their roles for a very long time, and they remember, they remember the Trump administration, they remember administrations before that. So maybe not as much of the news coverage of all these funding freezes and all that, but you remember what it was like. It was different coming into a new administration. It was different when you were having to decide what the budgets were going to look like, the different processes. I think it's going to be a lot different too if you work. I think that this can be the contract side or the nonprofit side of moving back to in person. I would hope that maybe some of the good part of the moving back to in person is maybe the government is going to be a little bit more easy to access and easy to get your questions asked, because that's a big pain point I see, is that you send an email and then you never get a response back and you're following up 10 times to get something done. So maybe the in-person, like where there's offices to call instead of it just being all email based, that's going to help push forward not only the funding but the contract. If you have answers, I don't know, have you seen anything like that on the contracting officer side?
Yeah, the back in the days, right, we used to call it walking the horse. So for example, let's assume you receive a grant or a contract from a specific program manager or a contracting officer, and so you might be there to talk to one person about maybe doing a quality assessment, or maybe talking about some project adjustment with the opportunities there, or the grant that you're servicing. But you're walking the hall, right? So you go see one person, you're walking the hall, you say, hey, I just saw your coworker, or this contract officer, and I noticed that you handle a lot of work in this area. And so, or you just kind of chit chat and talk to people. So you work the halls, you work once you're in the facility, you work you work those relationships. Because of the changes in terms of people shifting online and streaming and Zoom and Google Meet and so forth, the opportunities to walk the hall have completely changed in the last 4 years. So one positive in terms of people going back to the office, federal employees working in a in-person environment, that's going to help out with relationship building, because we're in a world where you're really in the people business, right? You're not in homelessness. You're not in janitorial services. You're not in these different programs, missions. They may be very different in terms of the niche missions and niche offerings that you provide. But at the end of the day, you're in the people business, and it's harder to do relationship by using online tools. It's always better to look somebody in the eye and talk to them and connect to them at a personal level. So that's one positive things as it relates back to the policy change in terms of requiring federal employees to be back. At a point, I think it was up to about 80% of federal employees not working in person. They were all working remote. So now it starts to shift. I think it was down to about 30%, but it will continue to shift to where only certain elements or certain communities can work remote. Everybody's is being asked to go back to the office.
Yeah, it's funny we bring this up. I was actually thinking about this. So, for those of you that are just joining us, hey, this is Lainey and this is Abe. Make sure to put your name and where you're joining us from, where your organization is from. But so we work at the Government Contracting Association, and we are all online. So we have our team member is it's worldwide, so we're spread out. So that is the plus, is that a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and spaces are able to come to collaborate. But one thing I miss about that is the in-office relationships. So getting to eat lunch with your coworkers, getting to, check in and just say, "Hey, how are you?" Like while you're getting coffee, that kind of stuff. I miss that. I'm a huge people person, and I've been thinking of some ways to kind of bring some of that relationship into our company, because it is hard when you're just on Zooms. I'm at my office, you're at your office. We don't see each other unless we meet up to see each other. So that is something that's hard. I think one thing too that I want people to start thinking about, and we're actually in a couple episodes, we're going to be diving more into how to do research into foundations. But if you are heavily federally funded, something that I want, we always talk about this, but start thinking about is, how do I get plugged in with these foundations? How can I move some of my eggs into another basket so that if something does happen with my federal funding, my entire organization isn't shut down? I'm able to diversify that funding and kind of have more well-roundedness in that. And then on the contract side, I guess what would be the equivalent of foundation grants, or what, maybe it wouldn't be necessarily the equivalent of foundations, but like how could a somebody that's in contracting kind of diversify what they're doing?
Yeah, that's let me share a very practical example. So we have a few members, and in their business they do DEI training, right? And so, so
Hmm.
right off the bat, their business is like, whoa. In fact, one lady, she got two of her contracts. She won these contracts. She received notification to stop work on two of these contracts here, to where it is gone, because she does DEI training at the federal level, state, county, and city level. So that's kind of her business. And so immediately she was impacted. There's a lot of concern on her part. And so there's two members, and I said, let me meet with you. And so in preparing for them, I'm going to share some practical tip that uh, I'm going to share with them. I'm meeting with them this Friday. And so as I meet with them, I'm going to share them these tips here. So if you guys are watching this here, and I'm using DEI as an example, that they are directly impacted and their business will absolutely have to change. But I'm gonna use this here so that you can think out of the box as well, and maybe there's some lessons learned from
Yeah.
these two companies, and how you can adapt your business, your nonprofit, your organization, as the world evolve and shift as well. So I'm gonna look at my quick notes in terms of what I'm gonna share with them, and then I'm gonna share some of these tips with you guys as well. So these two organizations, again, they are DI training organizations. So the first thing I share with them is, one is, if your business is, if you, as a DEI organization training people, uh, you become a DEI consultant, how to transition, instead of you feeling panic, right? Become a consulting company, how to transition from DEI into a new environment. Because all these different corporations, I would say most of them will start to make changes to their diversity, equity, inclusion programs. Some of them will eliminate them. Some of them will repackage it. And I said, so when you're thinking about this here, is there a difference between DEI and diversity? Right? DEI is a program. Diversity is not necessarily the same thing. So how do you adjust what you do? Well, diversity is reality, is the world that we live in. You don't need a program to have diversity. So think through how you're going to do that. So so that was one tip, is consult with companies that are going through the chaos, help them adjust to reframe, or to eliminate the program if that's what they want to do. How do you eliminate a program and still represent diversity without necessarily having a DEI program? So that's the first suggestions I made. And then the other thing is the EEOC, right? The EEOC that really supports anti-discrimination in the workforce and so forth, the Equal Opportunity Commission. how do you that agency may go through some changes, but that agency is not getting eliminated. So
Mhm.
instead of being a DEI consultant, you become an EEO specialist, right? Equal opportunity specialist, where you help people to have diversity, and you can have diversity without a program. So those are
Yeah.
some thoughts for them. Another is, more than anything, as a training organization, you're not necessarily a DI training organization. You are a training company. And so there's lots of other different things you can train, right? You can train soft skills, you can train hard skills. Soft skills in terms of interviewing skills, how to, in terms of leadership skills. You can also do technical hard skills such as, how to use AI, how to use Excel, how to use all these hard skills. You can
Yeah.
do compliance training. So I'm helping them to understand that training, there's many other things outside of DEI training, so they can shift their services into parallel areas, and then also from a in terms of a broader scope, become more of a generalist. So really, as a training company, they're really in the people business, which we talked about earlier. They're an HR company. They become more of a staffing solutions company, more of an administrative management company. And then as a training organization, this is really what we're going through, right? This is change management. So you become a change management consulting company, because in all of these confusion, change management is important. Nonprofit needs change management. For-profit needs change management. Big enterprise needs change management. Federal agencies need change management support. And then the last thought I have for them is, think through, how do you implement workforce development and so as some of these federal workers are leaving, they need new jobs. So how do you reposition them, maybe help them transition from federal agencies to state agencies to local agencies? In fact, there's over 50 federal, right? 50 states. So there's 50 states that they're understaffed. They need employees. There's over 3,000 counties. They need employees. There's over 35,000 cities and townships. They need employees. So how do you transition from being a federal employees to maybe to a local or state government, employee? So there's lots of different things to think out of the box. That's a very specific practical example of how these two companies, which are DI training organization, how they can shift. Now, practically for your organization as a nonprofit, as a for-profit, you have to think through, how do you shift as well? And so if
Yeah.
some of you, if you could put in there uh, the what you're thinking about in terms of your niche market, maybe we can actually, if you put in the chat area, maybe your specific niche, we can kind of give you some thoughts around that as well. But maybe we could go into some specific things in terms of currently what's happening. So right now, many of you, the funding freeze, as you know, has been rescinded. Um,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that it's going to permanently be rescinded, right? Because if the president wants to implement a funding freeze, if we think through beyond that, some of the specifics of why the funding freeze was created was so that there can be a review of the different programs that was funding environmental initiatives, that was funding DI initiatives, that were funding different programs that the president was not did not support based upon his own personal policies. So that's part of the landscape of why it was frozen. Um, Once it's rescinded, maybe the president might continue to try to freeze the different programs. USAID, which does a lot of great work internationally, some of them, that agency itself is going to get gutted right now. There are different agencies that's going to go through a gutting process to where there's going to be some major changes. Now, part of the reasons is we want smaller government, right? Smaller government, it means that we are trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. And so some of these things here will be positive for the next generation. Some of these changes will be positive for the future. But in the middle of this here, and again, there's chaos and there's confusion. But in the middle of this here, There are some pros that's going to happen from this here, but there's also your program that's getting impacted. So yeah, so you have to navigate through this process here.
Yeah, I think those are all great ideas, and I love hearing your viewpoint on stuff because you have so much just background coming from it and have real life examples. I have a question that I want to ask, but first I want to tell everybody, please put any questions you have in the chat. We're going to be answering them live. If you're watching on playback, obviously we cannot answer your question live, but if you have something, you can always send us an email. I'll put our email in the chat so you'll have that. But yeah, any specific ideas, please put them in the chat. We would love to discuss those as we're kind of having this discussion. But Abe, what would you say are some of the first steps for nonprofit organizations that one are thinking about setting that for-profit wing up? You know, what is that first step? There, it looks different for every single organization because they all deal with different stuff, but what would be some of the first steps of going after that to maybe get that where you're funding yourself?
If you are if you're dependent on somebody else, you're always going to be in the similar situation, right? Where you're dependent
Yeah.
on federal funding, or you're dependent on foundation funding and so forth. You're always at the mercy of somebody else. So to be more resilient for the future, you have to think out of the box. And I'm going to use AI as an example. Now, I have a deep mistrust of China, but some of you guys are familiar that DeepSeek came out. OpenAI and Anthropic received billions and billions of dollars to create ChatGPT and some of the tools that we're using it. Almost some of you are using these here on an everyday basis. And so billions of dollars was invested to create all these different AI learning, deposits and large language models and so forth. A Chinese organization invested $5.5 million, and they were able to build DeepSeek, and it is as good or as effective as billions of dollars that were being created. And and I bring that up because it goes back to what we're talking about here. The Chinese company did not have access to the most latest technology in terms of chips. They did not have access to the latest capabilities in terms of NVIDIA chips and so forth that we have, because there was a ban of selling some of these NVIDIA chips for processing purposes and data centers for the Chinese market. What they did was, because there is a lack of resources to us, we have to make things more efficient. We have to make things more resilient. We have to make things, we have to create different algorithm to create DeepSeek. Now, I don't recommend anybody using DeepSeek. That's just my own personal opinion, because my thought on it is, the Chinese communist regime, any technology that is built that has that is controlled by the Chinese government, your privacy is not necessarily guaranteed. I'm not saying that they are peeping into your private world, or DeepSeek is actually, I don't have any evidence that they are digging into all the data that they're ingesting and so forth like that. But I historically, being a person that opposed the communist regime from Laos, leaving Laos because the communist regime took over. Laos was backed by China, the Chinese government, and that's why Laos became a communist regime. I just have a long history of mistrust as it relates to a communist regime. With that said, my point with that example is that if you are limited in terms of resources, there's principles to learn, right? You have to do things better, more efficient, more effective, and think out of the box a little bit. So as it relates back to how do you build a organization, a nonprofit that can be more resilient for different administration in the future, whether it's this current administration or different administration in the future. And this goes a little bit out of the box a little bit, but starting a for-profit organization. Now, some of you may not know that a nonprofit can actually own the shares of a for-profit. Um, Now, as a nonprofit, you don't have shareholders. You have a board, you have a mission, but you don't have shareholders. Yes, you're still a corporate, but you operate very different from a for-profit. But as a nonprofit, you can actually set up a for-profit, and in March, we're actually going to be doing a class, going deep dive into how to set up a for-profit organization so that you can actually uh, build that to bring in program services to go after for-profit initiatives. Now we're talking about two worlds, right? We're talking about the grant world and the contract world. The contract world from the federal government is about $750 billion. The grant world is about 1.3 trillion, $1.5 trillion in terms of grants. So lots of opportunities, but you have to diversify a little bit of your approach of how do you bring in financial resources or funding resources for your nonprofit. One of them is consider starting a for-profit. Now, the for-profit, the shareholder is the nonprofit. The for-profit operates and goes out there and generate revenue. The profits from the for-profit goes into the nonprofit so that the nonprofit can fulfill its mission. So that's a very strategic approach. It's not for every nonprofit because now you're running a for-profit organization. So it's not meant for every single nonprofit to operate in this manner here. But for the right nonprofit, this is actually a very strategic approach of how you generate more funding or more revenue because in the nonprofit world, we call it funding resources. In the for-profit, we call it revenue. And so this is a very strategic approach. And in the future, in fact, I think Lainey just put the link into the upcoming class we're going to be doing in March. That's going to dive deep into how to set up a for-profit for your nonprofit and going after contract opportunities and private sector revenue opportunities.
Yeah, so that class I just put in the link, it's an in-person or you can do virtual. It's offered through the North Georgia Community Foundation, and Ava is going to be the presenter. I want to give an example of I think everybody knows about this example, but we kind of forget about this. It's when say a nonprofit, normally they're homeless shelters, women's shelters, that kind of stuff. They have thrift stores. Well, those thrift stores are operated on donations, and then the money and revenue that they get from those stores fund the foundation or fund the organization. So that's something that's I think everybody probably knows about that example. So we've got a lot of questions when we've talked about this of what does that look like? Like, I think wrapping your mind around a for-profit, it sounds way harder than it is, but like that's a very simple structure that a lot of organizations already have. So that's what we're trying to do is build out a service plan that funds your organization.
And practically, I'm going to share with you guys, and you guys know this organization, but you may not know the other things that they do. So I'm going to use USA Spending because for all of you who are nonprofits and for-profit as well, you need to be very comfortable with this website. This should be one of your favorite websites, usaspending.gov. As a nation, and as taxpayers, the government is accountable to how they spend our money, right? Our taxpayer money. And so usaspending.gov is a website that is used to report how our taxpayer money and the federal money is being used in the nonprofit world and the grant world. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to show you a nonprofit organization that have received a lot of contracts. So I'm going to come in here. And first, we're going to look at, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in their organization, and you will be surprised in terms of the contracts that they're actually doing.
I was wondering which organization it was going to be.
Right.
I would say my guess, just right off the bat, is that they have some contracts for workforce development.
Okay, that's a good guess, right? So,
Yeah.
so all of you guys know this organization, right? And I kind of like the logo because it makes me happy when I see the logo. Because you got a little G here, and then you got the G is also a happy face, and so I kind of like this logo here. But Goodwill. So we're gonna come in here. We're gonna look at Goodwill as an organization, and I'm just gonna check all the different Goodwills in here, and because they have different divisions that does different things. So and then
Yeah, there's a lot.
yep, they have different branches, and they're all under different. But well, let me go down directly to. I'm not going to put everything. I'm just going to go back to specifically, and hopefully we can catch most of it. All right, so Goodwill Villages, Goodwill ABC. Um,
Yeah, so somebody actually just asked a great question. Is there
mhm.
startup funding for profit businesses? And yes, I found a few grants that I've actually added onto our GovCon community. I'm going to post our link for everything. And you can go in there for free. There's paid versions that get you access to a couple of more things. But in our grant section, I added some grants, and I'm constantly doing that. And some of my grants that I added were for-profit companies, startup funds, that kind of stuff. So definitely check that out. And there's other ones. This is me just adding a couple of that I came across. Anytime I come across a grant, I add it in the community. But yeah, definitely you can do some research on that. And there are startup funding. I want to say be wary when I was looking at some startup funding. Some things, I just always want to preface grants. If it's from a reputable source, then you don't have to be anything worried about. But if there's certain ones that you're looking at and you're maybe just not getting the best feeling, you don't necessarily know the organization, it maybe sounds a little too good to be true, or if they're asking more than just basic information, I would encourage you to not apply, or maybe reach out and try to talk to somebody about it, or do a Google search and just say like this grant review or something. Try to get some more information, because when I was looking for some startup funding, when I was looking at these grants, I came across some sites that I was just a little iffy about. So I do want to do that as a warning if you are researching these. But I'm putting our GovCon community in the chat, so be sure to check that out, and it has those funding opportunities.
All right, so I just query. The official is the Goodwill Industries. And then let's see what the data pulls in terms of what we see. Now they do both, right? They receive as a nonprofit, they receive the uh, nonprofit side funding, and then they also receive contract as well. So, we look at this here. The Department of Labor, in terms of revenue, is $348 million. And then from the Department of Defense, 135 million, and the General Services 36 million, Department of Justice 36 million, and SBA 31 million. Now, not all of this here is grant, not all of it is contract, but let me once it pulls up, I can actually show you which. So you can see, right? So Goodwill Services, Goodwill Industry, $20 million, $9 million. They receive grants as well. If we look at the grant side, they receive 56 grants. The So there's grants, there's contracts. We normally just don't think that, a nonprofit can go out there and do grants. Now, the best use case examples is I see universities. Most universities are nonprofits. Now there are some for-profit universities out there, but or private universities. So if you look at this here, they receive grants 24 million. Now if we look at what these are, right? This is for employment. This
Mhm.
is for senior community service programs, um, mentoring programs, older workers program. So yes, you can receive contracts, you can receive grant opportunities to do exactly what you're doing. And join us in March so that we're going to do a deeper dive into some of these opportunities, and we'll give you more of a step-by-step approach if you decide to do this here, and what you can specifically do to address and have more of a diversified funding sources for your organization.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Abe. We have a question. I'm gonna add it to the screen so you can see it. In your opinion, what programs do you think this admin views as non-essential?
What programs? I don't have a strong opinion what is essential or what is non-essential, because I believe that if there is a program out there and is doing good, I believe it's all essential. For the recipient, right? Because some of you are in nonprofits, and the person receiving your support, it's essential
Yeah.
to that person. So I would say essential. What's considered essential is unique from every different perspective. So from my thought, um, what the current administration consider is essential is very different from the previous presidents what they consider essential. So I think essential is a matter of opinion and a matter of perspective. Um, it's essential to the person that's receiving the support. So from a policy perspective, I think it ebbs and flows. So I don't specifically can't say that this agency or that agency or this program or that program is not essential. I just think that they're all essential in their own unique ways and their own specific. But I tend to look at it from the eyes of the person receiving the help, because that's really what we do here, right? At the Government Contract Association, our role here is to empower the um, the small business community, to empower the nonprofit community, specifically those who are underserved. And that's why we do what we do here. Is so I believe that if we can help one nonprofit thrive during uncertain times like this here, we've done our job well here. If we can help one for-profit go out there and get a contract, we've done a great job in supporting. And then for that person, it was essential in terms of the work that we did. So my own personal thought about what's essential, non-essential.
Yeah, so I want to chime in and answer this question right quick. Is once again, this is my personal opinion and just the research I've done from Trump's last term and stuff we're seeing come out. Is I also kind of know the background of Margot asking. She's worried about the organizations that work with her, the North Georgia Community Foundation. I don't foresee like human services budgets. I'm not saying they're not going to get cut, but they're not going to be completely eradicated. That was a big thing that was seen in the last Trump administration, was that he wanted to focus on um, employment, mental health, human services as a whole. So I don't want to say don't ever. I don't want to encourage fear. From what we saw, I think that those are going to be considered essential programs, and I mean anything can change, but we saw that in the last administration, and I don't think this stuff is necessarily going to bleed over into that. Um, but Abe, so I wanted to bring up a point that you made. It was a little bit while ago, but you mentioned the buzzword China.
Mhm.
So what are you thinking about these tariffs? As of midnight, the tariffs are in effect. So, what are you thinking about that? What does this mean for businesses? What does this mean for us? And, what does it mean? I know it's a lot to go into. Everybody's all up in air about the tariffs. I think from my understanding is that we had these tariffs before. So it's now, I think, just getting more media about it because
Hmm.
everybody, it's just getting more limelight. So I think we've already had these tariffs in place before. So if you're a business that's been operating for more than 4 or 5 years, you've already lived under this type of
Hmm.
law. So don't be, once again, we don't want you to be fearful or anything. We will get through this. But what are you thinking?
Well, I am fearful about one thing. I'm going to go buy a truckload of toilet paper just in case the paper goes up.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, tariffs. So there's three nations, and potentially the European Union, have been talked about in rumor about as well. So the tariff was signed this past Saturday. 25% to Canada, 25% to Mexico, 10% to China. The As of last night, the tariffs for Canada and Mexico have been put on pause for 30 days. So what that means is that it's supposed to kicked in, I think, on Tuesday or something like that, but it was put on pause for 30 days. Uh, China, the tariff has not been paused, and so the 10% will be there. There was also instructions for the United States Postal Service not to deliver any products that's coming in from China. Uh, you're talking about major disruption to our economy. And so what the United States Postal Service just came out this morning, I'm talking about real time, right? Just came out and said, no, we're going to continue to ship. You're talking about, you're waiting for shoes, you're waiting for a certain products that you bought, and the U.S. Postal Service is saying have been instructed not to deliver it. Well, that has changed also, right? So we are going through a period of uncertainty. So if you don't receive your package, whether you bought it on Goodwill, I mean, whether you bought it on Amazon, or whether you bought it from Walmart.com, or from any other of these online stores, or from if you pre-order it and you don't see it, it could be tied up to some of these uncertainty. But from the tariff perspective, my first thought is this here. My first thought is that I have to look at the whole totality of how President Trump addresses his negotiating tactics. He normally does not negotiate from the current line, meaning that if he's negotiating a tariff perspective from zero, right now there's no tariffs on Canada. There's no tariffs on most stuff from China. There's no tariff on in for Mexico. You can't negotiate, or his approach is in negotiating is he doesn't negotiate from where he's at, zero. So what he does is he moved the line all the way to 25%, and then now he negotiates from that point there. So maybe his goal might be he wants a 10%, tariff, but he moves it to 25%, so that he can negotiate from that point. Or he might, and if there's no pushback, then that becomes the new tariff. And so
Yeah.
that's so my perspective. First of all, it's a negotiation tactics. He does the extreme so that he can renegotiate to really what he wants from the very beginning. And so with that, as relates to China, the tariffs will be there, and uh, regardless of what people have said, let me kind of give everybody a quick overview of how tariff works. Tariff is not a tax on China itself. China is not paying the 10% increase. The companies that are importing goods from China, they are the one that's paying the 10% increase. So, for example, if they're trying to import certain um, uh, laundry detergent, they're trying to import washing machine, they're trying to import clothing, they're trying to import vacuum cleaners that's made in China. We have a tremendous amount of goods and services. In fact, I'm going to take a quick second here. I'm going to look at my notes in terms of what type of products that we're importing from China, so that we can actually talk about specifics here. So the number one thing that we import from China Anybody guess? Lainey, if you have to guess, what do you think it is?
I've heard technology. I think toys are a big one. Um,
Number one.
Clothes,
Not even close.
washing machines.
Not even close.
What is it? Anybody have a guess in the chat?
Anybody have a guess?
Phones. I read this, so it was our iPhones. I actually wanted to say something before you explain more on this. Is that the article I was reading today about tariffs? I've been really intrigued in the tariffs thing. I was not very intrigued when I learned about this in school, but I think seeing it in real life is pretty interesting. But it's, we get all this hype about 10% increase. Everything's going to increase 10%. The tariff is not on, first off, our phone. Okay. However much you pay for a phone, it's a lot. Let's say you bought a new iPhone for $1,000. That does not mean it's getting a 10% increase on the $1,000. The person importing it is even if it's the 25% tariff, it's on based on what they paid for it. So they did not pay $1,000 that we have paid $1,000. They probably paid something crazy like, what do you think, $50 to import
Um,
this?
Generally, this is, I don't know the specific around cell phone, but in terms of general product markup itself, uh, you know, in terms of consumer goods, I don't know about cell phone itself, but more from a consumer goods. So a manufacturer manufactures a product. They normally mark it up about at a minimal 50%. If they don't mark it up 50%, they're not going to be sustainable. So if you built something for $100, you have to sell it for 50% of that. You have to sell at a minimum of 150. Now, cell phones, the margins are a lot higher than that because they have a lot of control in because very little competition. But
Just the logo on the
my
back
guess,
too.
if they're selling a cell phone for $1,000, it probably costs them about $250, maybe even less to make that cell phone. Because
Yeah,
the
so
retail
they're getting
thousand, yeah.
that tariff on that much. So that's what I read a couple articles that it was talking about that there's a high possibility that these tariffs, they don't necessarily affect us in the ways that we're hearing about them, that everything's going up 10% or that kind of stuff, that because the tariffs on, they're losing their margin. So yeah, we might get a smaller margin markup, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are getting that large of a markup on everything.
Yeah, it may not necessarily be 10% because if they're paying 10%, let's assume it costs 200. They're selling us a cell phone for 1,000, and because that's the number one import, $66 billion cell phone imported to the United
Wow.
States. So that's the largest category. Let's assume it's costing the manufacturer $200, and they're paying 10% on that, right? So which is $20. And so $20, and then they're selling us for let's assume they increase it. It's nominal. It's not going to be 10% of 1,000. It's going to be 10% on the $200 that they're actually paying for that there to bring that commodity into the United States. So there's a little bit of give there, but here's the thing. Remember when we went through COVID, a lot of different manufacturers raised their price. This was their chance to raise their price and blame it on COVID, right? So they didn't care that their industry wasn't really impacted by much. They just said, wow, now we're going to increase it by 20, 30%. And it made inflation go up. So I don't know if all these cell phone manufacturers going to play by 10% of $200 on a cell phone. They might just say, hey, we're gonna mark it up 10% on $1,000, right? So instead of a $20 increase, they're gonna increase it by $100. That means $80 goes into their pocket. So it depends. They might play the game in a manner that is unfair to the consumers.
Yeah, we could see that happening, I think. Or another article I read was talking about that we could see a lot of goods that China is making in China. They go around the tariff and they start manufacturing. They already manufacture stuff, for example, like in India, so they could just up their production in India and other places so they don't have the tariffs. So,
That's true. Because China has an international footprint, right?
yeah.
They do a lot of work in Southeast Asia, a lot of different. They invest heavily into the Vietnam economy. They invest in all over the world, and so they can shift production to other areas where there is no tariff, and then bring it in from there. So yeah, lots of changes and lots of games that can be played through all of this here.
So I think the biggest thing is before we finish up, what with businesses, what, there's pros and cons to these tariffs and everything of how do they navigate that? So this tariff's coming in. How can they use this to their advantage? What are some things that they can do to in all they win? A business owner wins versus somebody else winning.
Well, I want to piggyback a few things. Some people are putting their cars and household goods and so forth like that. We do not buy any cars from China, not that I know of. There's a lot of Chinese manufacturers in terms of cars. We buy car parts from China. Most of our import are from Europe, you know, from Korea and from Japan in terms of cars. But in terms of car parts, we do buy a lot that from China, which is about $14 billion in terms of parts from China that we bring into the U.S. Yeah, but ask your question again, and then let me. What
So
was
how Yeah, so how can a business use these tariffs for their advantage?
one? So first, you will see a little bit of impact in terms of your organization. As it relates to the government, if you're importing, you're not going to be able to sell most of these products to the federal market anyways, because there's what's called the Trade Agreement Act, TAA. So if you've been selling, anything that you buy from China to the federal government is really against the law, or you're breaking the Trade Agreement Act regulation. And now in terms of clothing and certain things, there's the Buy American Act, where the government is not going to buy clothing, uniforms and different things from companies that buy products from China or from certain countries. It cannot be sold to the federal marketplace. Now selling to the private sector, there's not a lot of issues there. And so there's already some limitations in terms of that there. So some of you who are selling different items, you're not going to be greatly impacted by the tariff, because you're not necessarily buying some of these, they're selling it to the federal government to start off with. But how do you position yourself, in terms of the tariffs? First of all, the um, all of this here, there's going to be some major changes before it's all said and done. We already saw a freeze on the tariff for Canada and Mexico. The strongest trade partners that the United States have is Canada and Mexico. And so this 25%, I really absolutely believe, in terms of what I said earlier, is it's just a negotiation tactic. If we really get into a trade war with Canada and Mexico, we buy I believe 60% of Canada's oil export comes to the United States. So if Canada says, you know what, you want to play this game here, they can say, we're going to stop selling you oil. And all of a sudden, they're saying, because oil is needed by the world. So Canada does not need to sell us their oil. So if we really get into a trade war, Canada can just say, okay, we're not, we're not going to sell our oil to the United States. We're going to sell it to Singapore. We're going to sell it to Japan. We're going to sell it to Africa. We're going to sell it to these other continents and these other countries. That's going to drive oil prices crazy up. We do not. We supply most of our oil need here directly, domestic U.S. oil production, but we also do a lot of import through OPEC, through this, through nations in the Middle Eastern. But a lot of our import comes from Canada. So how do you position yourself to thrive, with all these different tariffs? One is understand the landscape a little bit in terms of what are some of the imports that's being impacted. My other thought is, look for always expand, right? Always expand into other areas. So if you're selling products that's heavily imported from Mexico or heavily imported from Canada or China, that's going to be impacted uh, by the tariffs. One is adjust as you need to adjust because you still need to sell the same products and the same goods that you have, but expand your product offerings. I was working with a company, and they sell. We were helping build out their product offerings. We expanded to services because they were heavily selling products. So we said, how do you adjust? Well, offer services. So, for example, practically, there's one of the companies, they were selling medical equipment and medical supplies. And how do you diversify your revenue offerings if you're selling that? So I said, if you're selling medical equipment and laboratory equipment, all of these different equipment, there is a service, there's the maintenance side behind it, right? So the maintenance side behind it is what you offer. Because if you're selling a high tech epidemiology equipment to the CDC, or if you're selling some type of products to a laboratory where you're selling fume hoods that sucks up all the noxious fumes while they're doing research and so forth, someone has to service that. Someone has to change up the filter. So go after the service side of it, the contract side of it, as it relates to that same equipment that you're selling. Sell the services to it now, and sometimes services is actually more profitable because services. If you're selling the fume hood, you're selling it one time. If you're
Yeah.
selling the services, it's a 5-year contract. You get to service it for 5 years. So there's actually more money when you decide to diversify your offering, go from equipment, because tariffs is around products, right? It's not around services. Now there's services in the manufacturing, but there's no tariff in that. The tariff is on the end product itself. So in the supply chain of all this here, uh, pivot to more services. So that would be my biggest suggestion, is how you can thrive in this environment.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I think that I'm interested to see, too, just how people navigate this space. If we see more people, like you're saying, get into services, if we see more of those contracts come out, what that's going to look like. I know that we're hitting our hour mark, so Abe, we always do a freebie every single day, every single podcast on Wednesdays. So, do we have one today?
We have one is we have a few things that's going on. As an organization, we're always reinventing, creating new initiatives to really help the nonprofit community and the for-profit communities. As an organization, one thing is you have to, if you're marketing to the government market, whether state, county, cities, or federal, you have to be what we call procurement ready or grant ready. You have to be contract ready. And so we're creating a new program. This has never been done before. We're creating a new program called PREP. PREP stands for Procurement Readiness Educational Program. And we're actually going through the official process of getting it certified, or not approved, as a college level certification program. Just like our Certified Capture Manager program is a college level approved by the state of Georgia as a private university. We're a training institution. So although we're not designated as a university or a college, we're still a training institution recognized by the state of Georgia in terms of the training programs that we do here. So we're creating the PREP program. I'm going to give you guys a quick sneak peek into it, and so that if you guys have an interest in it, or if you know someone that may have an interest in it, this would be a great opportunity for you to share this here with them. So the PREP program, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, stands for Procurement Readiness Educational Program. And it's two things. It's about knowledge, but then also execution, right? Because sometimes you go to a conference and lots of great things are shared, and you come back home and you 3 months later you forget about it. You can take a class, and then two weeks later you put that whatever document you receive, you put it on the shelf. Well, the prep program, it's about readiness, and then it's also about education, right? So it's really two things: it's the readiness part and the education part. And so to do that, there we have the we're going to give you the knowledge, but we're also going to help you execute that. And so when you finish the program, you walk away with some very specific things, right? Because this is what I said in terms of what you're going to be walking away with. So let me move my mouse down here. You're going to walk away with these specific things. You're going to walk away with a capability statement. The government does not use brochures, they use capability statements. You're going to walk away with your industry codes, your NAICS code, your NIGP codes, your PSC codes. And if you're not familiar with NAICS code, NIGP, or PSC codes, you're going to learn what that is, and you're going to know how to identify as it matches your nonprofit, as it matches your for-profit. You're going to walk away with a capability video. A capability video is an infomercial video for your organization. Well, in the government market, it's very unique how you prepare your capability video. So we're going to show you how to create that and how to create it yourself, or how to use a very low cost a solution to help you create it for a few $100. You can get this done here. You're going to walk away with a capability brief and all these different things, right? Your website needs to look a certain way. It needs to, we're going to show you how to remake your website. It's a website makeover that speaks to government buyers and agency buyers and program managers. We're going to talk about your Dream 100, and then we're going to talk about your funding. There's lots of other things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your funding plan, and then you're going to walk away with a proposal library. We're going to give you some proposal templates, but more than anything, you're going to um, tweak it so that when you walk away, you can have sources sought responses and proposal responses to different scenarios that fits your business, your nonprofit. So that's what this is. Our CCM program is about knowledge and a little bit of practical application. This program is all about application, taking the knowledge and applying it, and it's a 7-week program. So it's starting off on February 25th. So if you're interested in this program here, there is a small investment for all of you who are joining us. The program is $5,000, but as a member, you get a $2,000 discount, and so the enrollment price is $3,000. But our giveaway today is this year for everyone who's listening, because there's a tariff 10% increase. We're actually going to decrease this year by 10%. So everyone who's listening, if you're interested, put your email into the chat, and we're going to send you a 10% code so that you can get a 10% discount. And then for one winner, we're going to give you a 50% discount off of the $3,000 enrollment. So if you're interested in this year, that's what we're going to, our giveaway today is a 50% to one person who's part of our live audience here. So Lainey, I want you to think through a number between 1 and 500, 1 and 500. And if you're interested in this here, put to get the 10%, we're going to make that available to everybody. But the 50% discount, put in your number in the chat area, and then we're going to Lainey is putting down her number on her pen and paper there, and so we're going to choose one winner to receive the 50% discount on this enrollment into the program. Now, if this is if you don't use the 10%, you can share it with a friend. So because not all of you will say, hey, you know what, this is the right program for me. But if you are a nonprofit, this is how you learn to set up a for-profit. Your for-profit is going to need these things, sir. And some of these things that do apply to you as a nonprofit as well, in terms of being properly registered, identifying your Dream 100, right? Which federal agency are buying your services or buying that is in alignment with your missions. Um, so last call, if you are interested in getting the 50% coupon, last call for that. So we see a few people putting their number into the chat, and we're going to do this giveaway in a second. Last call for the numbers. All right, Lainey, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can kind of see who the winners are for the winner
Yes. So I
situation.
was gonna see if some more people, I don't know. We have a lot more people than are putting their number in. So I was gonna see if maybe it's lagging a little bit before I pick the winner.
Sure.
And then I put our email. It's info@govcontractors.org. If you're on here, make sure to send us an email so you can get your 10% off tariff coupon for prep. And I also put the prep the link for that in there so that you're able to kind of go check it out. And that's also the link to our community. So definitely give that a check out. And like I talked about those grants, there's great articles that we have made sure to scrape the internet for so that you are getting news on what's going on in one place. It's a great opportunity. All right. Well, I am ready to go. My
Okay.
number was 100. So I think that makes Santosh the winner
Mm-hmm.
because his number was 7. So congratulations. Be sure to email us at info@govcontractors.org and we'll get you this 50% off coupon and get you set up for prep.
And then for everybody else, if you were not the winner, you're still a winner. So you can actually still email us and we will send you the 10% coupon so that you can be part of the prep if that's a good match for you as well. And if you're like, hey, let me learn more about it, and if you just want to find some time to talk to us about the program to see if it is a fit, reach out to us through the email as well, and then we can give you more information on it. Definitely go to the website to look at it and learn more about it. But reach out to us; we'll be more than happy to do a one-on-one meeting with you so that you can really see the benefits of it for your organization. Whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, you need to be grant ready, procurement ready in the government contracting space and the government grant space here.
Yeah, so everyone make sure to join us next Wednesday. We're going to have a great talk about starting and scaling your government contracting business in 2025. What does that look like? What are those steps? And well, as always, there will be some giveaways, so you want to make sure you stick around to the end. But we will see y'all next Wednesday. I almost said Monday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep. Eastern Time. Thanks for joining us today. And as usual, you are one contract away.
And 1 grant away. Bye,
All your
guys.
dreams, the employees, your goals, one contract, 1 grant away. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.